us midstream when they start getting a sense that a project is off the rails. And we follow very much the same effort. Those tend to be 2 to 3 months. Litigations can be years. So the duration is really different. But ultimately, we kind of still look at the trail of the breadcrumbs from the beginning to the end, and really understanding from our perspective, Collective Expectives being a client as well as consulting firm, where things, again, started going off the track.
Right. So in these cases, you typically have a plaintiff, of course, that is typically, and not always, but typically it's the company that was implementing technology, that the end customer is typically the plaintiff, and they're suing typically either the software vendor and or the party that implemented the software,
Right.
and that's the defendant. In most cases, sometimes the software vendor will end up suing or countersuing the plaintiff. But when we're looking at these cases where company fails in their implementation, they sue software vendor and or system integrator or implementer, who's well, first of all, who do we typically represent? Our team, or which side
Most
are we
often
on?
it's the client, the entity that actually secured the software, secured the SI, and is one paying the bill for the implementation is typically the one that feels the brunt of a project that has failed either at the beginning or at the end.
Right. And of course, there are times where software vendor or system integrator hires us as well to be on the defense.
Sure.
But it does seem like over the years, I don't know why this is, but it seems like it's sort of trended the direction you're talking, which is more the end customer that ends
Right.
up being that more commonly hires us. But when we're looking at these cases, then you've got the side that we're on, which is typically the plaintiff, but not always. And then you've got the defense, typically the software vendor, not always. Whose fault is it typically when we're doing these cases?
It's interesting when we start having conversation with the legal team, the attorneys that are actually ultimately the group that hire us on their client's behalf. We have a level set up front that we're going to look at this, as I mentioned earlier, in an impartial, unbiased view. And so far, in my experience as being part of the expert witness cases that we've worked on in the past, rarely is one party 100% at fault. And we set that tone up front. There is quite a bit of fault on the client side, on the plaintiff side, when a lack of understanding of what this kind of project is going to happen, lack of oversight of the SI. So we look at this again from an impartial perspective, but typically we see the burden is on the vendor side. They're the experts. That's why they were hired. The contract is being paid by the client. So it's really the burden of success falls on the technology team that's hired. Again, that's the expertise that the client is looking for. Again, there's a number of fingers to point on the client, on the plaintiff side as well. But typically what we see is the rigor and the approach of how the implementation is progressing is really on the vendor side to get it right and declare any kind of issues or risks along the way so that it never gets to litigation in the first place.
Right. Yeah. That's a good overview. And, I remember my first expert witness case. I didn't even know what an expert witness was. I kind of knew, I've watched TV and have seen the concept of expert witness, but I didn't really know what expert witness meant in the context of our industry. And I remember it was the Waste Management versus SAP case. This was probably 15 or 17 years ago when that lawsuit happened. And that was the first time I had ever done expert witness work. It was about 15 years ago when those attorneys contacted me for that case. And so for me, that was a really memorable one because I got to learn what an expert witness was while I was being an expert witness on one of the most publicized failures in recent memory. But from your perspective, without mentioning names necessarily, can you describe the biggest or the most complex or the most memorable expert witness case that you've been involved with so far?
Yeah, and appreciate that question. It's interesting because I look through all the cases that we've worked on in the past, regardless of industry, whether it's retail, manufacturing, distribution. The challenges come up again, not speaking names, but of course, many of the software platforms were the large ones, SAP, Oracle, and the like. What really becomes a challenge and issue around the complexity is those clients that have spent 20, 30 years developing proprietary software. They haven't really gone out to the market and looked at off-the-shelf systems, especially the scale of an ERP or other enterprise systems. and they get into the process of, I want the new system that is multi-tenant in the cloud. Functionality is kind of homogeneous at some level. And I want the system to do exactly what we did internally from a developed system for 30 years, day one, and I don't want any customization. And so the complexity of some of these cases, we had a retailer, they manufacture but also distribute other products, where they would look at outgoing shipments, and we're talking thousands of shipments a day out of their manufacturing and distribution center, and they would reset who gets that product on a daily basis. So the complexity of how to release product back into inventory, allocate that inventory to the highest priority customers that day, and then assign the product that may have been part of a previous order the day before, gets reassigned to a new order because that customer is more important to them. And to do that at the scale that multi-billion-dollar company, most out of the box, off the shelf systems can't handle that kind of processing. So we can talk about some of the challenges of why that project even got to that state. But really the complexity comes from those individuals, those clients that have developed their own software. So it's very unique to them, or they have never really done something like this before. And so the complexity isn't just the technology, but the project itself. And in one of the cases, and I'm sure we'll get into it today, one of the challenges, and we see this happening often with the client side, most often the plaintiff client, is the fact that they turn the keys of the implementation over to the system integrator. They don't know this. They don't understand what's going on. Here, make us happy. And that generally starts the process of disconnect around the phases of the project. And that's usually when there's issues of delay in the project, overruns on budget that come around. But really, it's the sophistication of the homegrown systems, regardless of the industry, that really trips up a lot of outside system integrators and software vendors from our perspective.